Oh boy, this is gonna be a doozy. Halo Combat Evolved has been praised for years as a genre-defining shooter. Its gameplay loop is something everyone can recognize, the art style and the enemies you fight, Master Chief's iconic design, and the main menu theme. It's been a landmark game in the shooter genre since its release on the original Xbox all the way back in 2001. 10 years after its release, we got HaloCE Anniversary, and that was pretty hit or miss. The updated graphics for the game made it look pretty weird, but you had the option to switch back to the old graphics, so finally you could play CombatEvolved in widescreen without having to use mods on PC. And recently we got this game, HaloCampaignEvolved. This game got announced back in October last year, and to say seeing Halo's face was a shock is an understatement. A lot of us assumed 343 would disappear for another 6 years after they released Infinite, just like the gap between 5 and Infinite. Well, it was close enough. When I first heard about it, I was pretty hyped for it. This was the first time I was actually getting to experience the release of a new Halo game since I only got into the series around 2022. But since I've been here long enough, I knew that I had to be cautiously optimistic. Don't get my hopes up too high, since if the game was a letdown, I wouldn't be as disappointed. And about 2 weeks ago, the game released to mixed reception, and I know why. Quick disclaimer, this isn't a full review of CampaignEvolved. This is only me highlighting highs and lows, but if you guys want more Halo content, just tell me. So go ahead and sit down, relax, grab a snack and a drink of choice, and let me explain to you some of the highs and lows with Halo's newest entry. One of the first caveats with the game I saw was when I first booted up the game and saw the main menu. The UI looks fine, but when I saw the ring, it looked a lot like CombatEvolved Anniversary's ring. The reason why Forerunner tech looked so appealing back then is because of how sleek and basic it looked. Its design was alien-like and mysterious, but here it looks a lot more man-made than it does alien. But considering the lore, it literally is a man-made structure, so there is also a very heavy amount of asset reuse in the CampaignEvolved. When I first loaded up the Pillar of Autumn and I got my hands on the Magnum and the AR, I used it for just a bit, and once I reloaded, I just got a bad taste of whiplash. They reused the Halo Infinite reload for the AR. Come on guys, you couldn't be fucking bothered to reanimate the rifle? You've had 5 years to do that! It can't possibly take that long to do rifle animations if you're just working on a pair of arms and a gun model. And speaking of animations, the reload on the Magnum is just pitiful. Let's compare two other reload animations. The original in CombatEvolved and the one in Infinite. A 20-year gap between both. The one in CombatEvolved is the benchmark. It's definitely amateur as this was Bungie's first outing, so of course the animations are a bit rough around the edges, but the reload is timeless. The one in Infinite is 20 years of progress in the gaming industry in terms of animation. The reload is snappy, responsive, and quick, that way you don't have a lot of downtime after you run out of ammo. But the one here in CampaignEvolved is just bland. I expected a blend of both animations, the movement from CombatEvolved paired with the snappiness and haste of the reload in Infinite. But we don't get that here. Which really sucks because gun reload animations are something I've always liked in video games. Just the movements, the sound of the parts clicking, and watching the ammo counter on your heads-up display going back to full after watching the reload animation. It always puts me into a mood of euphoria every time it happens. And another case of reusage is some of the sound effects. Some of the voice lines for the grunts are ones ripped right from CombatEvolved. The lieutenant piloting the escape pod on the Pillar of Autumn has the exact same lines from back in 2001 as well. I could understand re-recording some of the same lines can be a drag, but these are lines from 20 fucking years ago and you guys couldn't be bothered to re-record lines from a character who speaks like 3 or 4 times. The only case of asset reusage I'm fine with is the OST. The CombatEvolved OST is just a masterpiece, so keeping it baked into the game by default is a blessing. The gameplay in general is actually pretty fun. Since the engine is built on the Reach engine, it plays a lot like that, and personally Reach is one of my favorite Halo games, so it gets a few brownie points from me. The gunplay feels responsive and snappy like the one from Infinite if we subtract the reused animations. The damage feels as it should, and the speed of the gameplay is good enough to let me get into a flow state. Picking up power-ups instead of having to use them as soon as you come into contact with them, you can now pop them whenever you feel like, which is pretty useful since there have been times in CombatEvolved where I picked up an item and it was basically useless because there weren't any Covenant around for me to slaughter. The enemies are built on the AI that was used in Reach, so basically you're just fighting Reach difficulty enemies in CombatEvolved. It's either a good thing or a bad thing depending on who you ask, and I personally don't have an opinion on it. But on the topic of the enemies, something I noticed is that grunts tend to sewer slide bomb a lot more often with the plasma grenades. I usually figured they did it as a last resort, but sometimes they'll do it mid-combat, so then I have to step back or pepper them with bullets and wait for the grenades to go off before progressing. The Flood actually has the Flood tank coming in from Halo 3, which is a good way to spice up the gameplay, as now instead of just dealing with hordes of the Flood, you have to take into account the tanks bomb rushing you and evading them while chipping away very slowly at their health. Some weapons that were in Halo 2 that you saw in CombatEvolved but couldn't use are here. The energy sword in CombatEvolved has never felt better to use, since back in the original, they were a weapon that was in the game, but you couldn't use it. The Sentinel beam is here, and lasering enemies has never felt better, and the beam rifle has made its return, even if it's to a smaller extent, but it's still there. And the SMG from Halo 2 also makes an appearance here, that way you have another UNSC assault weapon to use if your rifle runs out of ammo. But there are definitely a few issues with the gameplay. First of all, sprinting. Come on, man. Sprinting in Halo? I thought we've already been through this since Reach. But it's okay, because you can toggle sprinting if you collect a skull for it. You cannot be fucking serious, 243. Why is this so fucking ass backwards, man? Like, why not reverse the skulls? Get a skull that gives you sprint instead of taking it away. Or while you're at it, just make it a fucking option in the settings menu. Jesus Christ, man. I feel like they did this just to inflate the hours people spend on this game just so people have more things to do. Because in CampaignEvolved, you only have 3 things you can do. The campaign, the Sergeant Johnson side missions, and co-op for both. What a bare bones build of CombatEvolved. I mean, yeah, CampaignEvolved is in the name, but still, stripping away multiplayer is like ripping someone's dick off and saying they'll be fine even though they're going to be in excruciating pain and won't be able to reproduce anymore. I won't go into much detail about the bonus missions since that'll be something I'll reserve for a full in-depth analysis of this game, but if you guys want that, then I'll happily oblige. And a big topic of discussion I've been seeing is the character models, more so on the human and UNSC side. The main Covenant and Flood models look just fine, but models like Captain Keyes, Sergeant Johnson, and Cortana... Keyes looks like fucking Ronald Reagan, Sergeant Johnson looks like Steve Harvey, and Cortana looks like Germa. Jesus Christ. Speaking of the characters, the cutscenes actually look great. The voice work is pretty spot on with rewrites every now and again. My only issue is that they're pre-rendered and not in-engine cutscenes, so all the people that pay $70 can't see the Pepto-Bismol chief standing in the snow talking to 343 Guilty Spark. Rest in peace to their wallets. Ooh, ah! But the biggest change in the game that, to me, has a mixed response from all across the board is the changes to the library. The library in CombatEvolved is remembered to be the most tedious and annoying part of the original game. The repeating rooms and constant swarms of Flood giving every player mutual and shared hatred for this one singular mission. But in CampaignEvolved, it's somewhat fixed. The rooms aren't as repeating, so you feel like you're actually making progress instead of it feeling like you're making none. And the Flood tanks, like I mentioned before, are plentiful, so you're constantly on your toes and can get lost into combat instead of feeling like you're doing pest control with Flood grubs and carriers. And the Sentinel drones actually do great to help you with getting rid of the Flood a lot more effectively than they did before. But the mission feels a bit too easy. Remember how I said somewhat? The library has gone from hell on earth to a snooze fest. Even with the Flood tanks here, it still feels pretty easy since the structure is just follow Guilty Spark, fight Flood for like 3 minutes, and then progress. Rinse and repeat. I mean, like, against the Flood tanks, you can two-tap them with the energy sword. I would have wanted this to be more challenging in a fun way instead of the original being a nightmare. But nope, it becomes the most boring part of the game now instead of the most rage-inducing one. I even contemplated shutting the game off when I got here, but I was able to pull through the whole chapter without doing that. Rest in peace to my sanity. My final statement on HaloCampaignEvolved is... just play CombatEvolved. And that pretty much wraps up this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Sorry again for being gone for so long. I got caught up with dealing with high school graduation and work-related stuff, but on days I don't have work, I'll try to dedicate more time to pushing videos out for you guys. And also join the Discord server. I was supposed to be announcing this when I was working on the X2 video, but since my microphone shit itself, that ended as well as you'd expect. If you are all fine with me using this mic for a while before I get a replacement, then I'll stick with this one when I finally do the X2 video. But in any case, that's all folks, and I'll see you again when I upload again, which will hopefully be soon. Alright then. See ya.